as you know, we are working on animal-human hybrids. So you're mixing your person and your animal, and you should already have your sketch done. What we're doing now is transferring our sketch onto our final board. So the reason why we're using this is for actually a couple of reasons. One, I want you to realize that art is more than just paper and pencil. It can be other mediums. Medium means the kind of things you're using to make art. So cardboard is actually a commonly used medium for art. It's also wonderful for charcoal because it has this neutral color for a background. So instead of being white paper where you can't really draw white highlights on, this is in the middle. So you can draw highlights and shadows and they'll both show up really nicely. And also we're recycling. So these were taken from the lunchroom, and I think it's a good use of extra materials, not wasting extra paper, saving the environment. So I'm going to show you first how we transfer our picture onto the board, and then I'll show you some techniques for using charcoal. So first we're going to start with making a grid on here. So when we make a grid on here and make a grid on our background, we can transfer our picture without having to draw it from our eye. It makes it a little bit easier. So what we're going to do, got my picture, I am going to draw 1-inch marks all the way across the top and all the way across the bottom and on both sides, so I can eventually make 1-inch by 1-inch squares. The way I do that is I line my ruler up with my top. Right now I'm not going to care about where the picture is going to be in there. I'm just going to line it up at the very top of my paper. Remember, you're not lining it up with the edge of your ruler because sometimes that first inch doesn't line up with the edge. You're lining it up with that first 1-inch mark. So I'm putting it at the top, and I'm just going to mark off wherever I see an inch. So 1, 2, 3, all the way through, looks like 9 over here. Then I'm going to move down to the bottom with 1 inch on the same side, starting at that line and not at the edge of my ruler, and marking those inches again. So now, got my 2 lines marked, top and bottom. I'm going to connect those lines I just made to make a vertical line straight down my paper all the way across. Now that I got my vertical lines, I'm going to do the same thing by putting inches all the way down each side so I can make some horizontal lines to complete my grid. So same thing, I'm putting the top line, not the edge of the ruler, but that top line at 0 at the edge of my paper, and I'm going to mark off every inch. Now you'll see sometimes there's a little bit extra at the end, so it's not a full inch. That's okay because I don't even need this bottom part anyways. But that means it's important to start with your 1 at the top over here, because if I were to turn this around, my little extra bit will be up here, and then my lines aren't going to match up. So make sure if you start with your 1 over here, you're going to start with your 1 over here. So I'm going to mark my 1 inch and continue. Alright, and then same thing, going to match this up with this and draw my horizontal line. Alright, so I got my 1 inch by 1 inch grid now. One thing that's important when you are making these lines and connecting them, it's really important to make sure your lines really hit those marks. If you get off a little bit and just connect it like this and then maybe a little bit below that line on the right, it's going to be slanted line and it's not going to have the right 1 inch by 1 inch square, and then when you copy it to your final, it's going to look kind of distorted. So make sure you're doing this part as accurately as you possibly can. So now what I get to do is choose which squares I want to use. So I don't really need these 2 on the end because they have nothing in them. So I'm just going to X them out. We're not even going to use them. I also don't need this little half inch at the bottom because there's nothing in that picture. And I don't need this top one. Or the side one. So what I'm left is this little box of squares here. So what I'm going to do is label them so I know which ones to copy and then how to copy them over here. So I'm going to start with my top left corner, and I'm just going to label it 1 through however many boxes I have on the top. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then same thing, but this time I'm going to do A through whatever to make it easier to distinguish the 2 sides. So A here, B, C, D, E, F, G. Beautiful. So I have 6 inches by, is that 6? 7 inches, 6 by 7. Now I'm going to transfer it to my final circle. So it's not going to be exactly right because this is a circle and this is a square, so you got to do some thinking here. So what I'm going to do is think about how big this is and how big I can make this over here, because you can make this bigger by making your squares over here bigger than 1 inch by 1 inch. So if I measure, it's 12 plus 4, 16 inches. So I am going from 7 inches to 16 inches. So it looks like I can fit it in there twice. So I'm going to take my squares here and times them by 2. So instead of 1 inch by 1 inch, I'm going to make 2 inch by 2 inch squares on here. I'm going to start by doing the same exact thing I did over there. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to mark off every 2 inches this time. So instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to do 2, 4, 6, 8. I'm going to do it again over here, just so that when I draw my lines across, they don't get slanted. I know they're straight across. My ruler to line them up and draw my horizontal . Okay, so I got my 2 inch horizontal lines. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to turn this to make it easier. Technically these would be my vertical lines. We're going to make them horizontal again, just so I don't have to do the extra work of thinking there. So same thing. I'm going to measure out. I'm going to use this line to keep me straight. I'm going to measure out 2 inches from the top. Alright, so now I have my 2 inch by 2 inch squares. Now I need to count out how many I needed. So I needed 6 by 7. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't really need these. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't need the bottom one. Now I'm going to label them just like I did. Now again, because we're going from a square to a circle, some might be cut off. So this might be my number 1, and yeah, it's number 1. I'm not going to be able to directly access it, but it's okay because I don't really have anything up there anyways. Your picture should usually be right in the middle of your paper. So I'm going to label it anyways, 1 through 6. And then A through whatever. Alright, and now I have the tools to transfer this picture to here without having to draw it again from my eye. So now all I'm going to do, just like you guys have done in lots of our little practice sheets, you're going to look at whatever square it is and draw what's in that square. So square 1A, I don't have anything in there that I care to draw, it's just a background. 2, nothing. 3, I got the hair. So what I'll do is I'll look at where it leaves my square on the sides. So right here is leaving it like a couple inches, couple centimeters from the edge. So I'm going to make mine leave from 2, 3A at that same spot. And it leaves at the top right, and then I'll draw everything else in between. So I'm going to do that across for every single square. I'm going to look at what's in that square, and I'm going to draw exactly what's in that square, just to make it a little bit more manageable, a little less scary than drawing one whole thing from your eye. All you got to do is draw what's in that box. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Just the outline. I'm not going to worry about shading because we're going to do shading with our charcoal and white pencil eventually. So right now, just draw your basic outline. My full thing drawn. You'll notice I didn't do all the tiny little details, like I didn't do all these little feathers, because eventually we're going to cover this up with charcoal and it's just going to cover up those details anyways, and I will be frustrated because I took so much time drawing them. So I'm just drawing a general outline so that I know where to put everything, and then in the end we can come in and add those things. Don't worry about these grid lines because we'll cover them up with the charcoal. They were just used to help place these pieces. So right now I'm going to show you how we're going to use charcoal and white charcoal to shade our picture and bring this thing to life.